On a frigid evening in Canterbury Cathedral, 4 armoured knights burst through the doors, swords gleaming in the candlelight. "Where is Thomas Becket, the king's traitor?" they shouted, their voices crashing against the ancient stone. Within moments, the holiest place in England would become a killing ground. What had driven these men to murder an archbishop at the altar, and had their king truly summoned the bloodshed? Thomas Becket had risen from London streets to the pinnacle of power. Once a clerk of modest origins, he became Chancellor to King Henry II, a trusted companion in hunts, councils, and feasts. Together they shared jokes, campaigns, and ambitions. But when Becket was made Archbishop of Canterbury in 1162, the friendship changed. The king's jovial ally turned into the church's stern guardian. The man who had once enforced royal policy now resisted it, insisting that the church owed its first loyalty to God, not the crown. Their conflict focused on a single, explosive issue: who held authority over the clergy. Priests accused of crimes could claim the protection of church courts, where punishments were often lighter than in the king's courts. To Henry, this looked like a loophole that sheltered criminals and weakened royal justice. To Becket, it was an ancient right of the church, a safeguard against secular overreach. Neither man would yield. The quarrel escalated until Becket, under mounting pressure and threat, fled into exile in France. For 6 long years he remained abroad, unbending in his opposition. By December 1170, it seemed the storm might finally break. Papal mediation and political necessity brought Becket back to England. Crowds greeted him as a returning shepherd. For a brief moment, reconciliation appeared possible, but peace proved brittle. Almost at once, Becket struck at those he saw as usurpers of his authority, excommunicating bishops who had sided with Henry, men who had dared to take part in the coronation of the king's son without Canterbury's consent. News of these excommunications sped across the Channel to Henry's court in Normandy. There, surrounded by barons and clerics already angered by Becket's return, the king exploded in fury. The exact words he spoke are lost, but chroniclers preserve the sense of a bitter outburst. Would no one rid him of this troublesome priest? In that moment of rage, 4 knights, Reginald Fitzurse, Hugh de Morville, William de Tracy, and Richard Brito, heard more than a complaint. They heard a call to action. They did not wait for written orders or formal commands. They saddled their horses, gathered their men, and crossed to England. As they rode through the short, hard days of winter, the air sharp with frost, their purpose hardened. They would silence the man who had defied their king and humiliated his loyal bishops. Twilight was falling on December 29th when they reached Canterbury and pushed into the cathedral precincts. Inside, Vespers had begun. Monks chanted in the nave, their voices rising in psalms before the high altar. Becket was dining in the Archbishop's hall when the knights arrived, armed and grim, their tempers stoked by days of travel and righteous anger. They confronted him at once. He must lift the excommunications they demanded and leave the kingdom. Becket refused both demands. He would not absolve the bishops who had violated Canterbury's rights, and he would not flee again. "I am no traitor," he declared. "Here I stand as Archbishop." The knights withdrew, but only to arm themselves fully. The danger was now unmistakable. Monks, sensing the peril, begged Becket to seek safety. They urged him to bar himself in the church, to hide among the shrines and chapels, to wait until the storm passed. Instead, Becket walked toward the cathedral, tall and composed, his clerics clustering around him. He would not turn his church into a fortress. The knights followed close behind, shoving aside terrified servants and clergy as they advanced. The great doors of the cathedral slammed shut, but the sanctuary was fragile. A monk, Edward Grimm, tried to hold the doors against the attackers. The knights hurled themselves at the wood until it splintered and gave way. Steel boots rang on the stone floor as they stormed into the dim interior, their armour clanking in the half-light. Inside, shadows leapt from flickering torches. The chanting faltered, then died. Becket moved toward the altar steps and took hold of a pillar, refusing to be dragged away. Fitzurse shouted again for him to absolve the bishops and submit. Becket stood firm. He would not bend to royal will against his conscience. "I cannot serve two masters, God and the king," he answered. The words hung in the cold air. The first blow came from Brito. His sword swung flat, striking Becket's shoulder. The Archbishop did not flinch. The restraint snapped. Fitzurse raised his blade and struck with its edge, cleaving into Becket's skull so that blood spattered the stone. Edward Grimm threw himself between them, trying to shield his Archbishop. A second stroke slashed Grimm's arm almost to the bone, but he clung on, desperate and failing. Becket sank to his knees at the foot of the altar. "For the name of Jesus and the Church," he murmured, "I embrace death." The swords came down again. Tracy struck his back. De Morville joined the assault. Brito delivered the mortal blow, splitting Becket's head so that his brains spilled onto the cathedral floor. A cleric who had come with the knights, Hugh Morclerk, pressed his foot on Becket's neck and wrenched the sword free, scattering what remained. "Away, knights," he cried. "He will rise no more." The nave fell still. The monks' chants were silenced, replaced by the drip of blood on stone. Becket's body lay crumpled at the altar's foot, his blood pooling on the pavement, staining forever the place where he had stood his ground. The knights, their work done and the spell of violence broken, ransacked briefly and then fled into the winter night. News of the killing spread with astonishing speed. That very night, the monks washed the body, preparing it for burial. As they worked, stories began to circulate of cures, of sudden healings linked to contact with his blood and garments. Soon crowds came to the cathedral, pilgrims clutching small flasks filled with diluted traces of his blood, ampulli treasured as holy relics. Becket was laid to rest in the crypt beneath the cathedral. His tomb became a magnet. The poor and the powerful alike came to pray, to touch the stone, to seek intercession from the man now hailed as a martyr. The memory of the murder, committed in so sacred a place, only intensified the devotion that gathered around his name. Across the Channel, Henry the Misicund faced the consequences. He professed horror at the deed, insisting he had never ordered Becket's death. Yet Europe recoiled. Pope Alexander III threatened excommunication. The killing of an archbishop in his own cathedral by knights who claimed to act in the king's service could not be dismissed as a mere misunderstanding. Under mounting pressure, Henry submitted to a public act of penance. In 1174, he walked barefoot from London to Canterbury, over rough roads and stones, dressed in sackcloth. At the cathedral, he lay before Becket's tomb while scores of monks scourged him in turn. He fasted, prayed, and pledged to respect the rites of the church, seeking to repair the damage done to his soul and his reputation. By then, Becket's fame had soared. He was canonized in 1173, only a few years after his death, an unusually swift recognition of a sainthood. His shrine, later rebuilt in splendour, drew pilgrims from across Christendom. In time, the road to Canterbury would be immortalised in tales of travellers bound for the martyr's resting place, each carrying private hopes and fears. Yet Henry's authority did not collapse. his realm held together, and the long contest between royal power and ecclesiastical privilege continued. The legal reforms he had championed, including measures that limited some church jurisdictions, still shaped English governance. The struggle between throne and altar did not end with Becket's blood. What changed was the moral landscape. The image of an archbishop cut down at the altar, refusing to abandon his principles, became a powerful symbol. For many, Becket's death marked a moment when conscience stood against kings and paid the ultimate price. His martyrdom strengthened the hand of the papacy and emboldened defenders of church independence. Did Henry's angry outburst truly unleash the blades in that sacred nave? The record cannot say with certainty. 4 knights acted, but the shadow of royal responsibility lingered over the crime. What is clear is that the murder reshaped Christendom's imagination. A priest unbowed, a king forced to kneel, a cathedral forever marked by the stain of spilled blood. In the centuries that followed, Becket's stand echoed in debates over power, law, and faith. His story became a warning and a rallying cry, invoked whenever rulers pressed too hard against the bounds of conscience. In the cold stone of Canterbury, where his life ended, the memory endures. A reminder that even kings cannot fully silence a voice raised at prayer's edge.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Make sure to leave a comment with who you want covered next.